in talking about worldview and talking about what's going on in the world, there's a lot of focus on the negative because we're in a very, very bad place with a lot of things. However, the best way to counteract negative and darkness is light. The best way to pull up from a downward path is an upward pull. So I want to look at sort of the direction that we want to go and what exactly it is that we're going for in worldview when we look at certain things and say that this is not what we want. Things like the levels of energy. Down at the bottom there's things like fear, apathy, anger. Apathy and fear is a big one. In the higher levels you have things like peace and joy and beauty. And so I think one of the things we want to call out is seeing when something is honestly ugly, when something is honestly like an apathetic people or a fearful people. This is not what we want, and drawing those contrasts and seeing the difference in what we want versus what we don't want.
A caterpillar is ugly, a butterfly is beautiful. It's rising from the, that's the story of rising from, sort of dirt to beauty. I suppose that's its own story, an archetype in itself.
So as we're calling things out as being ugly, disgusting, unideal, these are the things that have to be cleared out, as Bowden says.
Clear them out. Clear them out. You've got to clear them out. You've got to clear them out as well. There needs to be a new start.
And it's natural then to look to build and cultivate beauty again. Like, how about this place we're in right now? Let's have a little look around. This beautiful English green, absolutely wonderfully furnished with great flowers and trees and incredible, and it can only come from
a white man.
What are some things you think that need to be cultivated in the future?
I think there are a lot of obvious things that people are talking about which are good, which is obviously training, martial training for men, which is, great, but kind of goes without saying, really.
It's creation of a Nietzschean ideal of the Übermench, right? So you're talking of the creation of the coming man, I'd say, in martial arts, and this type of thing, physical training, creation of the coming man.
Yeah, there's no virtue in being weak. There's only virtue in being dangerous. I mean, there's no peace without war. You're not peaceful if you can't go to war.
Yeah, Morgoth in a video he made talking about a terrorist attack in France. He said,
when you saw all of the dead Frenchmen on Marseille Boulevard, they didn't have weapons. They didn't have, all they had was like mobile phones and flip-flops, and they and their families were all dead now. Now, what I realized then, this is 9 years ago, 8 years ago, is that they didn't actually have, where did they think they had the right to walk down Marseille Boulevard with their families, with their kids, completely unarmed, with no police around, with no armed guards around, nothing? What gave them the idea that they think they can do that? What gave them the idea that they had the right to do that? Because they hadn't actually done the unpleasant business of securing borders and making other men elsewhere in the world scared of them. And it's unfortunate, but this is what it boils down to. You know,
going back to something that needs to be cultivated, which I think perhaps has not been thought of so much, is, you know, we've got to collectivize as a people and unite together, but it's a collection of individuals. It's, you know, it's the warrior war band, it's the cowboy posse, it's, you know, it's the group of men who, you know, have their own thing going on, but it's like, oh, yo, bro, we can't allow that, what's going on over there, the fucking house is on fire, man, let's go and put that fucking shit out. You know, and there's no sort of, there's no system to it. You know, you don't have firemen, you don't have policemen, you don't have soldiers. It's just men who have the means to protect their people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every man should be a fireman, every man should be a gardener, every man should be a warrior, every man should be a policeman, every man should be a priest, every man should be a philosopher, every man should be a counselor, every man should be a savior, every man should be retribution upon his enemies. You've got to be all of these things, but we've got to have an individualistic, you know, sense of these things where we can express them ourselves in order so that we can collectivize. You know, you and me, we're on, you know, we read from the same book, but we're on very different pages on some things. You know, we are our own individuals, we've got our own sensibilities, but it's the recognition of the higher ideal and the greater meaning, which is our people.
And that's what unites us.
Brothers fight, but they're still brothers.
Yeah. So we've got the creation of the coming man in, I guess, propagation, but what we focused on here is training and becoming a man of character. And then we've got the bonds between men. And then we've got the destruction of evil so that you can have peace. So you've got the peace that comes from that, and the beauty that comes from that, a garden such as this one. How about modernism? Where does striving towards the future come into play for you?
Bro, the white man is modern.
Just in his natural expression.
White man is modern.
In what he does on his own.
Anything, it's just modern. We invented the motherfucking words. Well, this is where paganism comes in, right, actually. And I actually got this because this morning, while you were snoozing, I flicked through a couple of pages of hero worship and started to get into here. Carlyle's talks about paganism, and he said that clearly, you know, based upon hallucinations, you know, sort of crazy men doing weird fucked up shit, but had at its core had a virtuous ideal, and the men made it work. You know, the men that believed it made it work, even if it is not the truth. And that they were, you know, turning trees into gods. They made it work, and so you've got to have. I think you've got to have a little bit of pagan pragmatism. Maybe that's a new word, you know, quote or something. But because I think. That's kind of the nature's law book in a sense. That's the might is right. That's the other aspect to God's world. I showed you some sketches that I had made of stone hammers yesterday. Not of what I've made, but the designs that I had had. Now, Thor's hammer, well, Thor, thunder, hammer strike, sounds like thunder. And originally, you know, metallurgy didn't come around until whenever they say it came around. But first they made it out of stone, these axe hammers. Thor's hammer is originally made from stone because that's the material that they had. loads of these stone axe hammers were made over years and years and years and years, and then metallurgy came around, and you could make an axe or a hammer, you know, it's something like 30% more effective with metal. You know, you're spending 30% less time using a metal axe to chop the tree down. I mean, it's massively... Think, the pagans of Europe would keep their ancestors' stone axe hammers and would wear them around belts. And another tradition that they had, whenever there was a lightning strike on a piece of land, they would bury an axe hammer on that lightning strike. And there have even been lightning strikes. There are stories, I can't give you the exact story, but there's a story of a tree with an axe hammer buried underneath it that has been struck multiple times by lightning strikes, and it's supposed to have this, you know, deep spiritual place. But yeah, basically people kept carrying these stone axe hammers, which were, you know, it was a burden on the weight because they were heavy. You know, it wasn't an effective tool. They didn't even have handles for them from that point. They would just thread their belt through the eye hole where you'd have the handle and wear it on their belt, and it would be an ancient spiritual device that, well, artifact that would link them back to their people. And, you know, for the people in the Bronze Age who were dealing with bronze axes, some of those axe hammers were already 500 years old. You know, so they were ancient to those people.
Yeah.
You know, Woden, which is the English version of Odin, and Wotan, which is the Germanic version of Odin, and Zeus, which is the Greek/Latin version of Odin, thunder god. They're all thunder gods. You know, that is a unifying European, you know, piece of history and culture. And look, I'm Christian. You know, it's not the truth, but that goes back thousands of years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So part of what I'm getting from it is that as far as you go back, as long as white people are in their own company, not being subverted, they are tending towards the upwards. They're tending towards cultivating the future, and they're creating modernist striving beauty no matter where they are, and even if they're disconnected from Christianity, which the Europeans embraced when it was there. They're always futurism or modernism, this type of thing, is a natural product so long as they're in their own company, they're not acting like other people groups, they're not being ran by other people groups, or fall into the modern pathologies that we find ourselves in today that suppress modernism. And maybe that's why they have to create certain fake modernisms.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention, some people say that this idea of a sky father is very similar to the Christian father God, and that perhaps it was just a cultural manifestation of that before the new covenant and Christ came along. Because of course there is the theory that the Israelites left the Holy Land or their chosen land and went to Europe. And when you have a look at the migrations and see that these people could have been worshipping a god or sky fathers that could, you know, also perhaps be the, you know, our gods. But that's a little bit controversial.
Well, if what St. Augustine says is true, that God has two books, one is nature and one is the Bible, there could be some perennial consistencies between the connections that are made between the true divine in what the Nordics were seeing or feeling or finding about the world, to the far purer revelation of Christ in the Bible and in his incarnation on earth. Maybe there's just some perennial, blind feeling of the elephant there.
Yeah, I think so.